Welcome back, everyone. You know, we're getting a little closer to the end of the day here. We only got a few modules left, so we thought it might be a good idea if you guys have any questions to start, queuing them up, and we'll take a look at them towards the end.
Yeah, we'll do a little Q&A if there's any remainder ones floating around that we don't get to in the meantime, so keep chatting them out there.
So yeah, in this module, we're actually going to take a look at using the splash screens. We kind of messed up there. We thought we were coming back to live tiles, but apparently we're coming back to splash screens. But yeah, so we're going to take a quick look at how to implement and extend a splash screen.
Yep.
So our overview is we're going to extend the default splash screen that's already available. Mm-hmm. We're going to modify the splash image, right? So we'll show you where you can change that. And then, just kind of show you that this is how you're going to give feedback to the user, right? This is really important because if your app seems to hang for over 5 seconds, that's actually going to stop you from passing certification.
Right.
Right. So you want to do something like this to just let the user know, I haven't froze, I'm working, I'll be done soon type thing, right? So you don't have to necessarily do a loading bar like what we're doing here, but some sort of feedback, maybe a circle or even the dots going back and forth on the screen, just giving some feedback that you haven't hung.
Or color shift in the logo. Some people like to do that. Have like a little animated logo as the lights beam across it. Anything that shows motion is good enough. Unless it's a really extended period of time, then you want to go to that, we are loading somewhere in the giant scape of animation that you're doing.
Exactly, right? There's a lot of ways you can handle it, but basically the idea behind this is just give the user some feedback. Let them know what's going on so they don't just close your app thinking it's broken. So I'm going to pass it over to you and let us walk through the code real quick.
Sure. So here we have extending the splash screen. And as you can see, this doesn't look like C++ code. That's because it's not. But this is what you will see if you open up in your Visual Studios. And we'll step through this and take a look at the XAML files and show you where these are. But this is effectively written out in that XAML syntax. Looks sort of like HTML for those of you who aren't familiar with it, or XML if you're familiar with that. And really, it just goes through and it's set up. It's been stubbed in a little bit. We're going to have our drawing surface background there that we're dealing with. And you can see the image named extended splash image. That's actually our splash screen that we're playing around with. And inside that, we have our progress bar, which we named splash progress, just so it makes sense. It has a foreground color of white because it's just a white bar. The background color, a slight grayish color that we're going to stretch the white bar over top of. And really that's all there is to it. We've given it a width and a height, so we have it on the screen, and it's centered at the moment. Now, I moved mine previously. You saw that I snuck mine down and put it below while we were doing something in the previous module, but this is the default code where it's still just stuck right in the middle.
And when we jump in, you can actually show them how you moved that.
Sure, if I still have that. Okay, so from there, we have basically the extended splash timer. Okay, it's a dispatch timer that we've set up, and we also have a Boolean to check whether or not Unity is loaded, and we're going to have that Windows Gateway class that we looked at in a previous module. It's going to get the Unity loaded part from on Unity loaded, which is just going to be.
So it's much like an event handler. We're setting up an action that's basically going to say, when Unity's loaded, go ahead and fire off this code.
Right, exactly. So we create our extended splash timer here, and we go ahead and fill in this variable that we've created with a new dispatch timer, and we set up the interval. In this case, it's in the form of milliseconds, and we're going to start from milliseconds of 100 there. And we just tick away time. We keep adding to it, and we tell it, of course, that we would like it to start and listen for that extended splash timer tick to keep incrementing it along. And if you look at the tick function, it is marked as an asynchronous function, and it's going to control that extended splash sort of experience where you see some progress happening while whatever it's doing in the background. So in this case, we're going to calculate an increment, pulling it from the total milliseconds that we've used in the extended splash times since the last interval, and so on. And as long as Unity is still not loaded, and the splash screen value is less than our maximum minus the current increment, then we continue to add the increment on to our splash progress value, stretching out that bar sort of over time.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And otherwise, it's already reached its maximum or the game is done or whatever, we can go ahead and remove our extended splash, which is another function that we've written, and after a delay of a certain amount of time,
and basically for that reason,
right.
Yeah, that reason is basically so the user actually sees the bar hit 100%.
Right. You don't want it to instantly just disappear or something like that. You see that sometimes they're like, the bar is chugging, oh, it's going to load, it's going to load.
Gone.
And then it jumps a huge amount and removes. Now, because we are controlling it over time, it's nice and smooth, going increments, growing as it goes, and when it gets there, we have that slight pause of, in this case, 250 milliseconds, and then it's gone, and we can carry on. The onUnity loaded is just really going to be our accessor for this variable to set it to true, so that we now know that we are, and again, that's an asynchronous function, so it can be called sort of while other things are going on.
Exactly.
And we have our remove extended splash function that we saw being called there at the end once it's finished reaching the maximum potential and it has fully loaded. And in this case, we can now stop that splash timer, assuming it's still around and hasn't been cleaned up in some way. So we go ahead and just tell it to stop. And also, we can check the swap chain to see if the children, if the count is greater than 0, then we need to make sure that we remove certain things that we've left laying around, like the extended splash grid or any of those other elements. That's all we're verifying to see if there's any other things that were in there that were being drawn, and we pull them out because we no longer need them.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you, I'll show the code for the Windows Phone one, and then I'll let you show the one for the store.
Sure.
And so, yeah, you saw here, I'm going to load it up just one more time because it's, nice to see what we're talking about. So when I actually load the Sumo app there, it's very tiny, as you can see, and it moves really quick. But that's the loading bar, right? Oh, there we go. So basically, that's what we're trying to get on the screen. Is we're just trying to add that loading bar so that when the user first fires this up, they're going to see some sort of progress meter and let them know, right? Obviously, this one moves really quick. We don't have a lot of assets to load, so it's just almost instantaneous. But that's basically what we're trying to do there. So I'm going to go into the code and just kind of show you where it's set up. Oh, I didn't exit that. There we go. And I'll just tab over. So I believe I'm in my, I'm in my Windows Phone. So to set this up, we're actually going to be using XAML, which is one of the reasons why we decided to build a XAML project, is because we wanted to extend this, and we figured this is probably the easiest way of doing it. So we went and did it that way. So if you go into your main page XAML and actually double-click the XAML, and this is as opposed to us, we've mostly been focusing on the code behind.
That's right.
But this time around, we're actually going to take a look at the XAML page itself. And this is where you'll actually see that code that we showed in the first slide of this section that was actually showing you the code for your XAML. So this is where we put all that code. It's I just kind of wanted to keep that on the screen, but let me zoom out. I can always bring this back afterwards. Okay, so ooh, that's pretty big.
Looks big to you, but
is it okay? Is it easy to read? There we go.
Okay,
so yeah, this is where we're putting that actual code. So again, we've got our extended splash screen grid, which is what we're trying to write to. Then we have our image, right? So we pick an image. In this case, our image is blank for the phone. Then we have a splash screen progress bar, which we've named, obviously, splash progress. And again, gave it the foreground color of white, so that when you see it expand, it's expanding with the white color. And then with the background, it's just like an off gray, just so it looks like it's empty, right? So that's there. And then if you look at the code, or not the code rather, but the actual XAML editor, we're able to just really grab this and move it around. So if I didn't want the progress bar to be right in the middle, say I wanted it up towards the top, I could just move it up there, and it'll automatically change my XAML code to match that. So then if I was to build this out on the phone again and press play, I don't have the cable here to actually do that right now, but if I was to do that, it would actually show the progress bar up towards the top.
Right, and I'll show that when we do the store version.
So it's very simple to use the XAML editor, and that's why it's nice to build these kinds of things in XAML, is because you're actually seeing it as it'll appear on the phone.
Right, so if you have all your assets, you can drag and drop, put them in position. It does all the code for you for the XAML
positioning,
side of things.
yes.
Yeah, the positioning side of things, and then you do the code behind to control the progress
Yeah,
bar.
it's a WYSIWYG editor, right? What you see is what you get. It's very, very handy in that regard. So that's just, that's how to extend it with the phone. Here, I'm going to jump back into the code real quick here. If I go back into the code, I'll show you where we actually put this code behind. So if we go into this XAML CS file, you'll actually see where we actually add this code. So right here, again, we have our remove extended splash. This is what we call at the end when we're all done and we want to remove it. That's the code you saw on that one slide. And then again, we have our extended splash timer tick. This is the event handler, so every time we get a tick, we're going to call this function. We're going to do our code in here. That's basically, we set up an increment like you said, and we check to see if we've loaded yet. If we haven't loaded, let's add some increment to it. Else, if we have loaded, let's go ahead and set it to our maximum, so our bar is now completely full. We wait a little bit so the user actually sees this. It's not instantaneously off the screen. And then we remove our extended splash.
Right.
So very, very simple. Up here towards the top, this is where we actually set up our extended splash.
And again, this is part of that dual runtime environment. We can now do these kinds of things that are going to be just on the Windows Store version of the phone or the app, or in the Windows Phone version of the app, in your XAML pages and in the code behind, the CS files behind it, to go ahead and get these extra features that maybe you didn't have in your game originally on whatever other platform you were doing.
Exactly. So you got the the Windows gateway that's basically saying, when I'm loaded, I'm going to fire off this event, and then we catch this event inside of our XAML code, and then we do something inside of our XAML code based on that event that happened in our Unity.
Exactly.
So that it's a really nice way of connecting between the two and being able to pass those states.
Right.
So yeah, that's setting it up for the Windows Phone, and honestly, we're going to take a look at the. I'm just going to switch back over here. We'll take a look at the Windows Store, but it's not much different. It's literally pretty much the same code.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So again, it doesn't matter what platform. It's very similar on the Windows Store as it is on the Windows Store phone. You might just have extra considerations that you want to make available, maybe because of different screen formats or different amount of objects you're loading. You want a fancier load screen or a higher res load screen or something like that. Those are really the differences, not necessarily the implementations too much.
Exactly. So yeah, the code isn't really much different. The only major things like that you're looking at is just basically we set up the XAML like slightly different. In fact, I think if you look at this, it's pretty much the exact same.
Yes, that part's pretty much.
Yeah. The only thing is that I'm saying in the assets, that's where I've stored my splash screen.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So you want to go ahead and show them that in the editor and.
Sure. So if we pop over to mine, here we go. There we go. So I've already opened up the XAML nice and big here. You can see that's the bottom of our Sumo logo. And actually I can knock that down so that we can see it. There we go, a little bit more. So there it is. And there's my little loading block that I've just dragged down to the bottom. And if we look at the code here, you can see that it's added a margin to be able to pop it 519 away from this side, 527. It's not quite centered. I didn't really like that. I can jiggle it around. And if I, there you go, perfect. And I'm happy with that. And you see the code right here, pops it right in, 523 for left and right margins, 58 from the bottom, 685 from the top.
Just to show them, why don't you move it right to the top so they can see it? It's a little bit different, because they've seen it down there at the bottom, right? Okay. So they don't have to take our word for the fact that it actually works.
So we can throw it right back up there. And again, you see the numbers change quite drastically now. It's not perfectly centered anymore. And I can just fire it up from there. Those changes have taken hold, hopefully.
Well, I think
there it is.
Yeah, right at the very top. So pretty simple to do.
Yeah.
And
you can do all kinds of other things. It doesn't just have to be loading bars or anything like that. Again, we can do all kinds of stuff. Oh, I forgot I didn't remove that breakpoint when I was playing around with the other stuff and so on. But in essence, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Like a true programmer coding while I'm talking.
Yeah. Always better. Got to make it stronger, faster, better.
But yeah, so yeah, it doesn't take much to get something like this implemented.
No, it really doesn't. Again, it's all in that main XAML page. The code behind's in the XAML CS. Other than that, you're communicating through that direct crap. Can't remember what we called it there.
Windows gateway or
there
direct connection.
There we go. That's what you called the class. Yeah. Windows gateway or direct connection. Again, can be called whatever you want. And we're just talking back and forth.
Exactly. Like I said before, this isn't necessarily a requirement to pass certification, because if your game loads in under 5 seconds, then that's fine. But, it's always nice to let the user know what's going on.
In some games I've actually gone, because of that, it is good to have that user understanding what it is. I've actually had to go, games load so fast that I've had to put a fake progress bar in there that just waits time anyways, just because the game loads too fast, right? So it's just to let them know that it seems weird that there's a blank pause. You think your phone's like broken or your device isn't working. So rather than have that blank pause, throw up an image and throw a funny little scrolling bar that just pretty much like done and then goes. Just seeing that though, they're like, oh, that's better than...
It's reassurance, really, right?
Right, exactly. That's all. So I've actually had to do that in certain cases, which is sort of funny. When people hear about that, they're like, why would you make them wait? Well, I'm not really making them wait. I'm just making them wait like a fraction longer than we have to, so they don't feel like, oh, it didn't access what I wanted it to do. Or, oh, did it crash? Oh, no, it didn't. I don't want to scare them for that brief instant. They might be driving, I hope not, or something like that. You don't want to scare them or jar them, so it's easier just to give them that indication.
Yeah, and you might want to do something like maybe a tooltip. I've seen a lot of games lately doing tooltips, right? So
That's
you can give them a little hint towards what's coming up in the next level or something like that, right? Or maybe a secret that they can look for or something in the game. It's a good way, to take, if you're going to be loading anyway, take a few minutes and talk to your users through this loading bar, right?
I've seen that a lot more in the indie developments as well. They'll say silly things, like gathering pixels and stuff as it loads and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. A lot of people like to put the hints and the tips or advertise other games, and that's all fine. And this would be sort of how you'd implement those things. It doesn't have to be just the loading at the beginning. You can do the level loads in between, get your advertisements in there, get your extra content. Like advertisement sounds like, oh, you just want money. No, you're letting your other players know that there are other games that they might like. Right? It's not about that. It's about letting people know that there's more stuff that they like from you on these other sources. So
advertise DLC.
That's right. Well, yeah, DLC, there's that kind of stuff too, yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not a very complicated thing to implement, and it does add a nice layer of polish to your game.
That's right.
And if you're pushing it up to the store and you're trying to get sales and stuff like that, you want your game to look as polished as possible.
That's right.
And this is one of those simple ways to just make it look that much better.
Yeah, doesn't take long.
Exactly.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
If you have the art laying around, probably even less.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. So, yeah, it's definitely a good thing to take a look at. Is there any questions in chat right now that we could maybe take a look at? We got a few minutes before
Let me pop over here and I will see. And I saw poll, can you rotate the loading bar on Windows Phone in order to look right on landscape mode?
Actually, I'll show you guys one more time. It just happens so quick. And because what's happening is it's defaulted to that screen. Oh, that's the wrong game. There we go. So if I twist it quick enough, there we go. So it's orientated basically by the phone itself.
Right. So the phone has to kick in and then it's good.
Yeah, you could actually set a switch in there or a case in there that it would say only do it in landscape, right?
Yep.
But this is basically set up. If you saw when I had the XAML editor launched, it showed that I was in portrait mode.
That's right.
Right? So because I'm in portrait mode, it's automatically going to lay it this way. But as soon as I flip the phone while it's loading, it's like, oh, I've switched to landscape. I should change this.
Right. And in this case, you can see the game doesn't, we have set it up to not support those other modes. But the loading screen itself will.
Yes, because we actually set that inside of Unity. We didn't set that inside of our XAML code, right? So our XAML code thinks, oh, well, I can do both.
Yeah.
Right? So, that's something you want to watch out for, too. If you're only going to be supporting landscape mode, and honestly, we should have done this. We should have set it to only accept that input.
Well, at the same time, you could use XAML to tell them that please rotate your phone because I don't support this. So at the same time, it's good that you can do either one, because then you can give them that feedback so that they know to flip their phone back over and continue on. So that was a good question there, and by Jarek, I believe. What else we got? Does the accelerometer swap X and Y axes when the phone is turned in landscape mode? No, I don't believe it does. It doesn't change the... You could write that into your code, actually, if you wanted to. You could change it. You could change it so that when they hold it in a different orientation, you just invert your controls inside the game if you wanted to. The phone itself doesn't, because it makes more sense that the developer has control of that rather than the hardware, because then you'd have to constantly check, what mode do I think I'm in? What mode do I think I'm in? What mode do I think I'm in? And then have to deal with that, because X may now be Y, Y may now be X. As a developer, we don't want that to happen anyways. We don't want the hardware to flip back and forth on us and change.
Well, it could really mess up our input system, right? All of a sudden you're thinking, okay, I'm X, Y, and Z this way. Someone flips it and it changes, but you don't have a case inside of your code for that.
Right. So,
and now all of a sudden the controls are all messed up.
Instead you control that in your code, you check, and then you can swap your axes instead. It's better from the developer point of view that we have control over that, as opposed to the hardware doing it automatically, not giving us the option.
Exactly.
But that was a good question. Yeah, it was a good question, guys. Or girls, whoever it was. And I think that's it for right now.
Okay.
So
all right, we'll take another quick 10-minute break. We'll come back in. We'll talk about live tiles. That's what we have left. We'll do some live tiles, and then we'll take a little Q&A, and we'll wrap it up.
All right. Thanks a lot.
See you in 10.